I'm Jess Montgomery. I'm the author of the Kinship Mystery Series, and thank you to Writer Unboxed for helping those of us with books that are just new out this year or coming out in the middle of a pandemic. Not a sentence I thought I'd ever say, but thank you for helping us. Really appreciate it. And my book is called The Hollows. So I've got some great questions that I'm able to answer, and one is to tell you what the book is about. And it's the second in the Kinship Mystery Series, which is set in 1920s Appalachian, Ohio, inspired by Ohio's true first female sheriff, Maud Collins. And in this book, Lily Ross is the county sheriff. She's filling in for her husband who was killed in the line of duty in the first book, The Widows. And she's running for re-election, or election in her own right. She's been appointed to fill his job. And she's struggling with a little bit of depression. She wouldn't call it that, of course, in 1926, because she's realizing how much she loves being sheriff and working in law enforcement. And she also realizes that's something she wouldn't have discovered if her beloved husband hadn't passed away in the first book. So as she's campaigning, a case comes her way of an elderly woman that's not from the area, nobody knows who she is killed along the railroad track and going through a coal mining town. And Lily's called out to investigate, and she discovers as she's investigating some pretty dark secrets, both past and present, about the county that she very much wants to serve. So it's really a novel about haunts from your past, whether it's losing a loved one and still trying to cope with that, or haunts from a historic past that's kind of dark. So that's what the book's about. So how long did it take me to write this book? This book took me about a year. That included researching and drafting and a little bit of my own revision. And then, of course, about another 9 months or so of revising with my editor, going through copy edits, going through proofreading. How did my book take me to church? I like that question. Or how did it stretch you? Actually, one of the plot points really stretched me because...
I don't know that.
I guess I must have accidentally said Alexa. Anyway, one of the plot points stretched me because the book is set in 1926, and I did some research on what was happening in 1926 that was unusual, that wasn't, what everybody would think of as happening in the mid-20s. And I discovered that there was a WKKK, which was a women's KKK group, and it was national. There were chapters in every state at the time, and I was shocked by that. And that sounds a little glib, I suppose, because the KKK rose during one of its iterations in the 20s, and but it was just somehow just shocking to me to think about. Partly coming out of the women's right to vote movement was the WKKK. And at first, I'll be honest, I thought, I cannot write about that. I can't bring myself to write about it. And then it was kind of like the genie's out of the bottle. Now you're aware of this group, and it was part of everyday life in 1926 in Ohio and across the country. You kind of have to write about it. So it's not the entire plot, but it's part of the plot. And I can now say on the other end that I'm glad I explored that piece of our history. It really helped me kind of understand some subtleties about our history and some things that are still going on. So it was worth it to me. So let's see. What's something in your writer's toolbox that I can share, such as a technique, which kind of fits about the other question of secret to perseverance, even when the draft is beating you up. I just finished book 3, talk about feeling beaten up, or you're full of doubt. I'm always full of doubt. So what I would say to writers is, if you're feeling beaten up by your manuscript or full of doubt, just sort of accept it as part of what it means to be a writer. I'm friends with so many writers, and we're such an anxious breed. It is really true. And that's partly because we have such great imaginations. I mean, our job is to literally think about ways to, get our characters into trouble and then get them out of trouble. So of course we're anxious. But one of the things I do when I'm starting to write, it's interesting. Every time I'm starting to write, I get about maybe a minute or two in, and then I immediately think, oh, but I need to do this other thing. And I know that's my way of like being afraid. So what I do is I tell myself, you know, you just have to keep going. And then, of course, then I have all these doubts that rush in. So it sounds goofy, but I imagine my doubt and fear and all those voices of why are you doing this? You can't do this. I just imagine them as like little cartoon gnomes sitting on a couch in my imagination. And I tell them, you know what? You just sit there and talk amongst yourselves and I'll get back to you. And then I can start writing, which I know sounds goofy, but you know, fear and doubt are always going to be there. So you have to find a way to kind of box them off and put them aside for at least a little while, and know that the very fact you're creating something is a beautiful, good thing in this world. So whoever you are that's watching this video, if you're writing, whether you haven't had anything published or you've had a whole bunch published, I say it's a beautiful thing, maybe especially in the middle of a pandemic, to be writing about life and humans and how we can be kind to each other. Ultimately, even in an era that might bring us the WKKK or might bring us a pandemic. Let's see. So, I was invited by this list of questions that I could read the first paragraph or so. The first paragraph is one sentence. So I'm going to read the first couple of paragraphs. It's not super long. So here's the very beginning of the Hollows. For near on 10 miles, the old woman walks without ceasing. The full moon ladles light into the deep, clear night. The light trickles between trees, some already bereft of leaves, to softly pool in spots along her path. The path her daddy had taught her. She follows it now as then, hearkening to his whisper welling up from 70 years past, and as she does, her hips and knees unstiffen into sprightliness. At each milestone across the swinging bridge, past a large boulder tumbled down from the ridge countless ages ago, her breath and heart quicken, not so much from physical effort as from the excitement of the path springing back to life, and herself springing back to a younger life. Years and places and people fall away as if the path forgives her for forgetting it, as if it has always remembered her, has patiently awaited her return, knowing she would at last remember it too and come back to it, knowing it would, in the end, claim her. So that's the very opening to The Hollows. So if you go to my website, www.jessmontgomeryauthor.com, you can find some buying links on the usual suspects of online vendors. You can go to IndieBound and find the book and purchase it through an independent bookstore near you. You can also check out vendors such as Poisoned Pen, A Murder by the Book are two that have been super nice and had me sign copies. So you can get an autographed copies from those bookstores. Just Google their names, Murder by the Book, it's in Houston, Texas, and Poisoned Pen. And that way you'd be supporting an independent bookstore as well. So if you do get a hold of my book and you'd like an autographed book sticker, just email me via my website, jessmontgomeryauthor.com. And if you want to stay in touch, find me via my website or find me on Facebook. And thanks to everybody for helping writers and bookstores, and stay safe and stay well.